They had just been to the finals. The core was battle-tested, the banners were still fresh. And then, in the middle of the summer, the franchise blew it all up. We dive into the contract tensions, the locker room divide, the infamous offseason decisions, and the quiet front office maneuvering that made the trade happen. Welcome to the Trade Rewind. Let's get into it.
So the year is 2004. All right, once I say it, you'll know pretty quickly. The Lakers have just lost in the finals to the Pistons. In the last 5 seasons, they've had a three-peat, 2000 and 2002. Then they lose in the playoffs 2003 to the Spurs. 2004, they make the finals, lose to the Pistons. A couple of months after the finals, July 14th, the Lakers trade Shaq to the Heat.
Of course.
Which takes the league. It's shocking, but at the same time, people kind of knew what was going on. What was crazy I saw was ESPN the whole day when that happened, the whole coverage of ESPN was Shaq trade, and the big headline was Lakers pick Kobe.
Right.
That was the big news. Lakers pick Kobe over Shaq.
They had just come off of losing the finals.
They just lost in the finals. They made the finals. That's why I really wanted to do this, because we were young and it's hard to really understand that. Like, everyone knows the Shaq trade and, oh, they needed to trade him because Kobe and Shaq had beef and whatever. They had just played in the finals. And if to that happened today's day and age, you make the finals and then trade your arguably best player or second best player, people would lose their minds. I mean, the Thunder traded James Harden after losing the finals, but he was their sixth man and he was great, but he wasn't their superstar.
I mean, I assume people lost their minds at the time.
So there was, but it's interesting because the reaction was mixed because people knew it was time for them to kind of split up. First, I want to just kind of go what led up to this. Okay, so they lose in the finals. They had added Karl Malone and Gary Payton to go all in. After losing the Spurs 2003, they add these guys to try to win 2004.
All in with two 45-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly. They lose to the Pistons in 5 games. The chemistry is broken. The Pistons said, we're going to stop Kobe, and that's how we're going to win. And they did. They took away Kobe, and the whole Lakers ISO ball didn't work. So how did the beef even start? That's what kind of was interesting to me. So it started with Shaq asking to be paid more after their three-peat. Shaq wanted a max extension. Even though he was under contract, he's like, I'm the most dominant player ever. Pay me like it.
Right.
Jerry Buss at the time was like, Shaq's entering his 30s. Big men historically declined pretty quick after their 30s. And Buss wanted some flexibility. So he offered Shaq less than the max. Shaq immediately took that as disrespect. And that was the beginning of the end. So that was step 1. That's after 2002 season.
But then he's on the team for
2 more seasons.
2 more seasons.
At the end of the 2003 season, they lose to the Spurs. And Shaq had been playing through a toe injury for most of that season. And this is the famous thing. After the season, Shaq waited till the summer to get surgery on his toe, which made him miss the beginning of the next season. And Kobe was pissed about it. And when asked about it, why don't you do the surgery right after the season? He said, I got hurt on company time. I'll rehab on company time.
That's crazy.
Kobe always had issues because he thought Shaq didn't take conditioning seriously. And he just didn't care. He wasn't a team guy, he felt like. So by 2003, 2004, the locker room was split into 2 camps. The Shaq camp, which was Rick Fox and initially Derek Fisher was part of Team Shaq. And then Team Kobe was the young players and the coaches. The coaches valued Kobe's work ethic. Phil Jackson, wrote in his book that season the locker room felt like a Cold War. Wow. So there was a lot of problems. The 2004 finals broke them. Right? They expected to beat Detroit. They were favored. And instead, the Pistons shut down Kobe, exposed all their chemistry issues, and they lost. After Game 5, Shaq hugged his teammates like that was the last time they're ever going to see each other.
He knew that was it.
And Kobe stormed out. At the time, Pat Riley kind of knew, right? Everyone knew that there was issues going around the league. But Pat Riley had been slowly putting in whispers through agents and through people, basically making the pitch. So he knew his audience. He said, you could get the Miami lifestyle, a young superstar in Dwayne Wade, a big contract extension, and we'll build it around you. So those were all the things that Shaq wants.
Right.
Mitch Kupchak, who was the GM of the Lakers at the time, he didn't want a public bidding war. This is similar to the Luka thing where they didn't really shop him. They didn't shop him around and see who's giving us the best offer. They went to Miami, focused on Miami because they had young talent, and he knew that they would extend Shaq immediately. That was the thing. Shaq wanted his max contract. Once the terms were agreed, the trade was leaked, and the players all found out on TV,
Wow.
which is unbelievable.
That happens nowadays all the time.
Yep. Nowadays, it's impossible. Immediately, within days of the trade, Miami gave Shaq his 5-year, $100 million deal. And then Shaq changed his nickname from the Big Aristotle to the Big Diesel because he's like, I'm making big money now.
It's funny because if I'm not mistaken, he had a similar transition from Orlando to LA, where he wanted the max, and Orlando was having a hard time wrapping their head around giving it to him. And then finally, by the time they offered it, LA had already stolen his heart, and he was a free agent, and he signed there.
Well, that's the thing. What's interesting about Shaq, and we get to see him on TV, and you kind of hear how his mind works. Respect matters to him a lot.
Yeah.
And he wants to be respected. He wants to be, known as even now, it's like important to be known as the most dominant ever. He wants to be respected. He wants everyone to feel that way about him. And the second that you hesitate to give him that kind of respect, things aren't cool between us anymore.
Right.
And this happened twice. It happened with the Magic. It happens with the Lakers. And he already obviously had the issues with Kobe, but this added to that, was that you're not respecting me. You're not paying me what I deserve. We're talking about a guy who's coming off a three-peat and was the most dominant player in the league by far.
It's also interesting, though, because part of respect is earning it. And yeah, I guess his feeling was on the court, I'm still dominant. But the Kobe breakdown kind of makes sense. When we hear all these stories about Kobe, and especially for Kobe, I'm sure, which he says, looking at Shaq, and Kobe's just thinking, if I had your physique, if I had your athleticism, if I was you and I had my work ethic, I'd be the GOAT. I'd never lose the finals. I'd never lose a game.
Right. And it's funny you say that, and it's true. And that's who Kobe was. That's why they clash, because Shaq is a big jokester. I heard a great story that Shaq, someone asked an NBA coach, I can't remember which one, but he was asked at like a panel. He's like, why couldn't Shaq hit free throws? And, Shaq always says, well, when it mattered, I did. And I've seen some great videos and the stats on if Shaq shot like 70%, he probably would have won another MVP and a bunch of other things because he would have scored like 4 more points a game, which a lot of things if he could have shot free throws at a better percentage. So they asked him, he's like, why can't Shaq shoot free throws? Like, can he work on it? Like figure it out. And this coach said, he's like, let me tell you a story about Shaq that explains why he can't hit free throws. He said that, I think this is in Orlando, but I'm not positive. Shaq was hurt. And so Shaq wasn't practicing, and they sent him to the bike to do some conditioning. And so he's on the side doing his conditioning, and the coach's back is facing Shaq as he's talking to players. And Shaq is screwing around, half-assing it, kind of like making faces and whatever. And he said every time Shaq, like the coach turned and looked at him, all of a sudden, head down, pumping as fast as he can, like he's doing the hardest workout of his life. And then the coaches would turn around and he'd kind of go back to goofing around. And he said that is the epitome of Shaq, that he was this supreme talent, massive physical behemoth, but he couldn't really be fully serious. And when it came to free throws or anything of that sort, he could never really put in the real work that is needed to make that kind of change.
Right. To his core, he was just kind of a goofy little kid.
It's also like this guy from a young age, everywhere he went, he dominated. So it's a little bit hard to even be like, well, he should have been working harder. It was working what he was doing. You know what I mean? How do you even instill work ethic in a guy who didn't need it? He was the best player in the league and a finals MVP and MVP without doing that, which is always like, what if? And you see how his career obviously fizzled out at the end because he couldn't stay in shape and was injured a lot, which also happens to a lot of guys who are really tall, like 7'3". And that's why, of course, the Kobe and Shaq beef started. They're just such polar opposites. Kobe couldn't comprehend not putting the work in. That's just so against his whole human being. That's who he is work. And Shaq was just not like that.
Yeah, and I think probably part of it for Kobe was an ego thing, that he was still worse, right? That
Shaq was getting the finals MVP.
Right. Shaq was still viewed as better than him, and Kobe's probably thinking, I work so hard, I do everything, and I just don't have these things that I can't attain, right? I can't be 7 feet tall and massive and dominant and have all these literal physical things that Shaq has. I'm never gonna have those, and he's still better than me even though I work so hard. That was probably frustrating because you think, "Why didn't he have a problem with" I'm sure he worked harder than everyone else on the team. He doesn't have a problem with the guys who are worse than him,
Right.
and if you think about MJ, it's probably the same thing. That's why he didn't have any beef with anyone on his team because he was still the alpha. He was still
Yeah. Well,
A1. He was the best no matter what.
I mean, right. But I will say Kobe was very young when he was with Shaq. I mean, this is when he's 25, right? This happens. And
Young, but
by the end of his career, is it even a question?
what?
I mean, people might disagree. I'm all in Kobe. I think Kobe's definitely better than Shaq career wise. Am I wrong?
Oh, throughout his career, yeah,
So
sure.
maybe at that moment, but Shaq was 32 in his prime, and Kobe was, a youngin.
No, well, there's 2 things I'll say that. One is still, I would say Shaq was more dominant in his prime than Kobe ever was.
Okay, even though Kobe had an 80-point game, but okay.
Yeah, fine, 1 game he was able to do it, but over the course of seasons and
Shaq was, and I agree with Shaq. He was the most dominant ever, but it was physically dominant. It wasn't like this skill based dominance, even though he was pretty skilled.
no, but his physical plus skill
Yeah,
led to the most
absolutely, the
dominant.
most dominant. I'll give him that.
And the second thing is, it's interesting, Trinity Rodman was just on Pat McAfee, and I think she's 23 or something now, and she was saying, "I'm not sure if I'm a vet or a young player because I got drafted when I was 17, 18 years old. I've been in the league for 5 years, but I'm also 23."
Right,
Same thing with Kobe. Okay, sure, you're 25 years old, but he's been in the league for 7 years
right,
now.
and a 3-time champ. So he was a big time player.
And that was probably close to his prime. I mean, physically, it should have been his prime.
I mean,
Athletically, skill-wise, I guess he
I would
continues to
say his
improve.
prime gets closer to like 28 because then that's when he wins another 2 rings and he's the guy.
Right.
I think it's interesting. I wonder if Kobe would have become who he was if Shaq stayed, right? Because then being without Shaq is kind of what motivated him to go win another by himself, and he did these things as the main guy, and that kind of made him who he was.
I think he was plenty motivated by himself.
No, of course, but like, you know, if he was with Shaq the whole time, who knows? Maybe Shaq would have just kept getting those MVPs, and he just would have been the second guy.
Yeah.
So let's go through just the actual trade. The Lakers received Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, Brian Grant, who was kind of just a salary filler, a veteran big, a 2006 first round pick, and 2007 second round pick. The 2006 first round pick became Jordan Farmar, who was a solid rotation guy for their championship teams. The second round pick ended up being used in a different trade. So when you look at it, I mean, Lamar Odom became actually a very important piece of what they did. But, they got pieces. I wouldn't say they got like this amazing haul.
No, not at all. It's actually shocking. Think about what
But
a prime Shaq would go for nowadays.
right, but part of it is that it opened up cap space and gave them flexibility. And then as we discussed in a previous episode, they make the Pau Gasol trade. That wouldn't have been possible if Shaq is around. Obviously, Shaq's a better player, but this kind of let them reload and open up space and build their next, not dynasty, but their next championship team.
Yeah.
Just immediately after, this is, I didn't even remember this. Shaq finishes second in MVP voting his first season on the Heat, and they lose in the conference finals. Year 2, they win the NBA championship.
Wow.
Wade gets MVP. That was there, right? They were down 2-1, and then Wade dominated the last 3 games of that series. That's 2005, 2006. By 2007, 2008, he starts to physically decline. He gets traded to Phoenix in 2008. And then his career kind of fizzled out after that. He ended up on the Celtics for a minute. He was all over. He was with the Cavs, LeBron for a minute. So but the Heat got what they wanted, which is, Shaq and Wade together in a championship. And if you think about the Lakers, so their next couple of seasons are actually pretty rough. They missed the playoffs in 2005. We're talking about a team that made the finals. They missed the playoffs. 2006 and 7, Kobe was unstoppable. He has 81-point game, but they weren't winning. Then they make their trade for Pau, and then they win back-to-back. Caron Butler later gets flipped for Kwame Brown. But it's interesting to think about. I look at this kind of as a win-win trade because Shaq was done there. That's the thing that we have to take into account. I don't think Shaq was going to lace up another game for the Lakers. The way it ended with the finals, the way he walked out, he was done.
Right.
So once he's done, first of all, you lose some of your negotiating power, right? When a guy doesn't want to be there, you can't really get everything you want.
I don't know. We've seen guys go recently in the NBA. We've seen people request trade and still go for plenty of first round picks.
That's true. It's interesting to think about who can we compare in today's NBA that's like Shaq injury, maybe Giannis.
Yeah, and
And
Giannis.
Giannis, they want multiple first rounders, a blue chip guy, and a current guy and a prospect. They want everything.
How old did you say Shaq was?
Shaq was 32, so that's part of it. A 32-year-old center at 7'3", who's known for conditioning issues.
So it's actually really interesting because we're recording this the day before the NBA trade deadline. So it's possible that Giannis will be traded, although
Yes.
it's trending that people are saying he's not going to be
I
until
hope he
the
does,
summer.
but it looks like he won't.
We'll find out. That would actually be a really good marker because Giannis is 31 years old. And I don't know. This is the only thing I'll say on why I think.
But do you think but Giannis has no questions about conditioning. He gets injured, but he puts in the work to get back in shape. Like, he's a different player than Shaq.
Yeah, but he still is huge. But I guess he plays a little bit faster. I don't know. It's so hard to know. Yeah, I mean, 7-footers, it's hard. They get injured a lot of the time, and they're just literal freaks of human beings whose proportions are insane. And it's hard to not get injured when you're like that and stay healthy for a long time. I mean, we've seen people do it. Really, the only one that comes to mind of someone that tall, I guess, is Kevin Durant, who stayed healthy for so long.
Right.
But he's so different.
I
We'll
mean,
see.
yeah, today's day and age, guys recover a little better. And I also think that KD is a different situation. My theory, I have my own personal theories about these kind of injuries. These like Achilles, like usually you say Achilles is a career ender. But my belief is if you're a great shooter, you can get over it. Like KD, he's not dunking on people anymore. But because of how good his shot is, he kind of was able to withstand that kind of injury.
Kobe never got over it, though. He was too old.
Kobe never did. He was older, and
Was he older?
was he 36 when he 35? And that is true, but I also think the way they do the surgery is not the same. Like, now you get the surgery, like, the next day.
Kobe tore his Achilles at 34. KD tore it at 30.
Right. So there is a big difference.
We'll see what happens to Tatum. I also think recovery is just better. I actually think there might be an actual difference in the surgery or something.
Right.
I don't think it's just like, oh, all of a sudden people can recover. I think they figured out a better way to repair it.
No, 100%. I mean, look at Tatum, right? Tatum, they did it, I think, the same day or the next day, and he's almost back. The medicine is that obviously improved. I think that was the big thing. Shaq was 32, and if you're thinking about it, who are you picking between Shaq 32 and Kobe 25? You factor in the fact that Kobe has this amazing work ethic, and Shaq is known as not that.
Yeah, this is my only issues with the trade. My two major things. Number one is I can't comprehend why they're doing these like backdoor secret meetings to trade good players. No, wouldn't you want a bidding war? Is there any advantage to not putting them on the open market and seeing who wants to give me the most amount of picks and the best players? Like, what is this that we're just, going to one team and being like, all right, that sounds good.
Yeah, so it is a good point, and I think that's the same thing we said about Luka. Well, like, what I don't understand not shopping someone. The only thing they could in this story is that you needed a team that would sign into it an extension that was willing to do it, and Shaq had to want to be there, right? Because he's not signing an extension with just anyone.
Yeah, but we see that all the time that happens.
Yeah, that part I don't understand.
So that also to me, that's, I never understand that. And it seems like, I don't know. I mean, if we're thinking about trades at the time, nothing, I mean, I'm not so well versed in what other trades were going down there for big name players in that era, but I can't imagine that this was the best they could do.
Right. It's a good point. Real quick, I have some of the reaction at the time, the media reaction. So, like I said, right, the headlines were Lakers choose Kobe over Shaq. Other headlines, end of an era in LA, and did the Lakers give up too soon? Were the big questions. Stephen A is actually interesting. He said the Lakers had no choice. He said it was toxic there, but he warned that Miami might get a title immediately. Kudos to Stephen A. Good call.
Doesn't always happen.
Bill Simmons, he said Miami robbed the Lakers. He said it was a fleecing. Many thought LA didn't get enough back for a top 3 player ever. I guess they felt at that time, but others said, people were split. Others said Shaq's age made it reasonable. GMs around the league were shocked, this is what's crazy, like what we're talking about. How did they not shop him? GMs around the league were shocked the trade happened. How were they not involved?
Right. Work the phones.
So that's pretty crazy. They thought LA would never actually trade him and they were just all talk. Lamar Odom was known as a guy who had potential, but we're talking about peak Shaq. Immediately Miami becomes a contender. The Heat ticket sales sold out like the next day.
Right.
So it was just the big question was age, versus prime. Do you want the older guy who's dominant, or do you want the younger guy? It's a very interesting thing. In LA, they kind of blamed Kobe, the fans, but there was also fans who thought Shaq was lazy. I do think overall people were like, "Are you you're crazy? You're trading Shaq?" But it sounded like people were a little more understanding than they would be in today's day and age. I think social media is different. Today's day and age, that GM's getting fired like pretty soon. Even if it works out 3 years later, you think they would have let Mitch Kupchak hang around to winning a finals after trading Shaq? 2 seasons of not being good, he would have been gone in today's day and age.
I guess so. I mean, the only thing is that it seems like there was no other option, right? They had to go one way or the other, so they went younger. The other thing that I think is probably a knock against the Lakers is, I mean, to some degree, right? It's your job, and we see this a lot with basically every trade that we've covered. I want to say is not every single trade, but many of these trades, a player is forcing their way out one way or another.
Yeah.
It's just things happen, whatever. I guess when you get to the point where there's no other option, you have to trade Kobe or you have to trade Shaq. Okay, fine. You trade Shaq, that makes sense. He's older. Kobe's 7 years younger or something at the time. Makes more sense to trade Shaq in that situation. You should also be judged, I guess, on what you could have been with Shaq. And
And that's a great point. And that's why you look at his trade, there's no proven player on the other side. Lamar Odom was a kind of a prospect. How do you not get a superstar or someone who's already a star? How does that not happen? Or maybe if you're getting 5 picks, they got 1 pick and a second rounder, 1 first rounder. It just, and I know they didn't trade picks the way they do now, but it is shocking to me looking back at that part. Hindsight's 2020 and it worked out.
so funny because as bad as the trade almost should have been or could have been, whatever you want to say, it actually ends up being pretty even. Like you were saying, they both get Lakers end up with 2 finals, not directly from the trade, but they're able to turn it around and they chose Kobe. So they're
Right.
saying,
And
we made the right
their
choice.
flexibility from moving on Shaq helped them and eventually do that. Like if they signed Shaq to this massive deal, then they would have been stuck with him with his injuries after.
Maybe. I mean, the Heat traded him while he was still under that contract.
Right. The other thing that I tend to think about, I was thinking to myself, it's Phil Jackson, an all-time coach. He couldn't figure it out and get them to work it out. Like the dude's like a hippie. Couldn't you just give him smoke a joint and figure it out? I don't understand that. He dealt with Jordan and Pippen who had their own issues. We're talking about the great Phil Jackson and he was like, it was a cold war in there. We had to make a trade. So when a guy like Phil Jackson who's seen it all at that point, if he signed off on that trade, it must mean it wasn't going to get fixed. I mean, look at it. Kobe and Shaq, it took till years later, way after they retired, to even get back in the same room and kind of, work things out.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking the same thing. I mean, not about the Jordan Pippen thing, but just you would think that Phil Jackson, being such a good coach, would have an ability to navigate these things. But I guess it's so hard. Like you were saying, the second they disrespected Shaq, he's done. Pippen took it. Jordan was basically like, Jordan was getting paid like twice as much as the rest of the team combined or something. And he just told Pippen, like, shut up and play.
Right. I mean, well, there is, Pippen had his own stuff, right? When Jordan was out, when Jordan left to MLB, they drew up a play not for Pippen at the end of the game, and Pippen, refused to get on the court. So he had his own stuff with Pippen, but they always were able to work it out. And he was always like they worked out having Dennis Rodman on that roster. They were able to work it out, and the fact that they couldn't work it out with Shaq and Kobe, I mean, it is a good point. Who knows how many rings they could have won together? Maybe they could have won 8. They could have just been dominating.
Yeah, well, I think the big difference ultimately between Kobe and Jordan was that Jordan was literally willing to do anything to win. And Kobe was like, he probably sacrificed a couple finals. He ended up with 5. Would he not have had more if Shaq stayed?
It's a big what if, because I mean they might have won 1 or 2 more then, which we get to, but they wouldn't have gotten the whole like the Powell thing might not happen. So it would have been immediately they would have been better, but in the future, who knows?
Yeah, but why should we assume that Kobe wouldn't have, if they trade Shaq
Right.
later?
Who knows? It could be if they kept Shaq, Kobe would have left that at some point. I mean, Kobe almost left that at some point anyway.
Right. Because ultimately, to me, watching The Last Dance, you see Jordan is literally, he's with Phil Jackson. It's almost, he's Phil Jackson's lieutenant in a way almost, where he's negotiating with Dennis Rodman.
Yes.
He's like, you know what? What's Dennis Rodman's like, I can't play. All right. I need some time off. And Jordan, like, you have a week.
Yeah.
Like they're negotiating. They're like,
It's
oh yeah,
unbelievable.
you can just leave in the middle of the season as if that's normal behavior. You can leave. Jordan gives it the stamp of approval. He goes off, does his whole crazy week long. He gets married.
Bender, yeah.
He's in the WWE. He's going completely nuts. And then he doesn't show up. And Jordan flies out to get him,
It's an unbelievable
brings him
story.
back.
Yeah.
So there was just that. And I think also, I guess part of that is that Jordan had so much respect from the other guys.
Right.
That he was the only one who Rodman was like, all right, if MJ pulls up and he flies down to Florida, wherever I am, and he's like, all right, it's time to come back and play basketball, that he just shut up and listened.
Right. It's a really important distinction there because Kobe, right, that we said the locker room was split. So it wasn't like Kobe was the guy and everyone listened to Kobe. Shaq had people on his side. It's not like Kobe could have been like, hey, we're doing it this way, and everyone would get in line. Because Shaq had his own side. People were on Shaq's side. And I think the biggest thing that I think about, obviously the GM could have gotten a lot more, but this is really a story about 2 historically stubborn personalities in Kobe and Shaq. And then Kobe's just extremely stubborn about his way. And Shaq is like, you're not going to disrespect me. So Shaq he might not be stubborn in terms of like the work. Once you look at him a certain way or tell him a certain thing, it's over between you and him.
Yeah.
And 2 historically stubborn superstars, mega superstars that just were not going to be able to work things out.
Yeah, and we all know basketball players are generally more dramatic.
Divas. It's funny that Pat Riley thinking about Shaq, let's sell him on the nightlife. He'll get the party in Miami. That's what's going into it. Like, how are we going to get Shaq? Tell him it's going to be great weather and he'll party. It's unbelievable.
Right. Imagine trying to sell some of these psychos, trying to sell like Brady. Oh, you can come party here. Why would I ever do that?
Do you have avocado ice cream?
Yeah.
I think so. It's such an interesting story. And I agree that looking back, it's one of those things that it's a win-win. Miami got exactly what they were looking for, which is a win and a ring. And then the Lakers got to kind of reload and eventually they built into a team that won 2 more. But boy, I mean, like it's definitely one of, NBA history's big what ifs, because who knows how long they could have dominated the league. And it's another situation where we just question what was the GM thinking with not shopping him?
I mean, that is always the question. If they ever don't shop a player, I don't understand. Why would you ever not?
Can you think of a situation where you don't shop a player? The only one I can think of is like a sign and trade where like I'm only going to that place.
Yeah, I mean,
And Shaq was a little bit like that, where it needed to be a team that Shaq agreed that he would sign with, or else the team wouldn't trade for him. So he agreed, I'm going to sign an extension with the Heat. So he could have, that's where the player has leverage, where he could be like, I'm not going to Phoenix because I'm not going to sign an extension, and now they're not going to give all their picks or all their pieces.
right. But usually the way that goes then is you ask permission from the team. This is what we saw with Jared Allen. He asked permission from the team. Fine, you don't want to pay me. Let me
find a partner.
Let me find someone who's willing to give me the contract.
Right.
Team says we're willing to give the contract, and now the trade happens. So, I mean, I just don't understand it, especially if people are saying that they would have given more. I guess the sign and trade makes it a little bit, his contract was expiring. So from the Lakers' perspective,
We had one more year.
right, but that's the Lakers' perspective. All right, he only had 1 year left on on the contract. Let's get something now. But no, I cannot comprehend why you would ever. You literally all you have to do, ask the player for a list of teams. He says, "Oh, I'm willing to go to these 5, 6, 7, however many places," and then all you do is call those places. What's your best offer?
Right.
Oh, you know what? Miami's offering me blank. What about you throwing an extra first round pick?
So what's interesting is the GM Mitch Kupchak. At the time, his focus was this is a really toxic situation, and I don't want to make it more toxic. And that's where he was like, let me keep all these trade talks on the DL. But the truth is, if you're gonna blow it up anyway, like who cares how toxic it is? Let the whole league know you're trying to trade him. Who cares?
Right, and it's the off.
Shaq all but said, I'm done with the Lakers. He left the locker room and was giving everyone hugs like, I'm gone. It's already toxic. Like, we don't need to protect everyone's feelings. Get the best deal.
And it's the offseason. No one's in the building.
Yeah, you sometimes just don't understand the dynamic with some of these GMs and like what they were thinking at the time. And in theory, it makes sense. Like, oh, just, like, let's just get this quick over with. But you're talking about one of the most dominant players ever. And you didn't even get anyone who had an all-star yet. How is that possible?
Yeah, it's insane. We'd like to formally invite Mitch Kupchak to come on the podcast and explain the thought process because we're very curious.
And we'd also like to just put it down, in writing, but not writing, and just keep a copy of this. If either of us become a GM, we will shop.
We'll shop. Yes.
We will not go to secretly talk to one team. We will shop our players. If we're making a trade, I want the best offer.
I would have got 7 first-round picks for Shaq, for the record.
I think I would have gotten maybe a former MVP and a couple of all-stars.
Yeah. I would have said, I'm only trading him if you give me D-Wade and Lamar Odom back.
Right. It's interesting to think about. If you take away context and we take away, right, the Lakers' future and them winning, it's a terrible trade. If we take away what happens after they get Pau Gasol and they end up winning, if you just purely focus on the trade, it was not a good trade.
Right. At the time, that's why people were outraged.
The only thing you could say about the trade that was good is you're getting rid of this locker room, whatever, beef. Right. And you're saying we're going all in on you, Kobe.
Yeah.
Which he wanted, and he took that to heart. And Kobe says, right, the reason he thanks Shaq for winning with Miami, because he's like, because you won 4, I knew I had to get 5. So sure, it might have lit a fire under Kobe, even though you didn't need to, because Kobe's was a psycho anyway. But it's a wild thing that this is what occurred. And if you look without the fact that they won, just of the people who were in the trade, and you take out context, it's shocking.
Yeah, well, the trade had to happen. They just should have gotten more, bottom line. All right, I think it's time to move into the grades on this.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go first. That can be our thing, You present, I'll grade first.
What are you thinking? Where are you feeling on this?
I mean,
you had to take context into account. They did win.
I know that's the issue. Is the whole point of these look backs, what we're trying to do is see how it actually plays out.
How it turned out, right?
And it plays out fine. I mean, Lamar Odom, I guess the only thing though is if you want to look just strictly at the trade itself, basically they got back a couple. I mean, like Lamar Odom was an important piece for them. I don't know if they knew how important he was going to be, but he was an important piece. He was on the Lakers for 7 years. So
and he's part of their 2 championships.
Right.
I think they ended up with a couple of role players that really helped them win.
And Shaq was only on the Heat for 3.5 seasons, but
when they got their ring,
they got an MVP and they got a championship out of him.
Second in MVP. Did he win MVP?
Second in MVP?
He was second in MVP voting.
Yeah, sorry. Correction. He was second in MVP voting, and they won a championship with him. I mean, was he the best player on that team? Or was Wade better than him?
Wade was the guy.
I think Wade
finals, but he was obviously a major part of it. There's no question. The Miami, exactly what they wanted from that trade they got.
Yeah. Okay, so then, you know what? Obviously, 0 would be completely even trade. I'm going to put it at a 5-1.
I like that. Like just a little bit over 51% right there. I like that. That's a good,
because it's not. I mean, it's not like the worst trade ever, but it's still a bad trade for the Lakers. They made a poor decision. They had to trade Shaq. Like I said, he had to go, but they should have gotten more, and they didn't get more. So 5.1. That's my grade.
Do you think if like let's say it was 3 first rounders. Would that have been enough?
Maybe. I guess it turns what that turns into.
Right.
You know?
I think the fact that there wasn't a proven guy in that trade is pretty crazy. Like a proven star, or Caron Butler was a fine player, and Lamar Odom was young. There was no proven like here's an all-star. There wasn't that. And so I'm with you. I'm right around the same place. I'm 4.7. I think, as we do, this is about looking back and seeing how it turned out. And it ended up turning out pretty good for both teams. I think if you had told them before this is what's going to happen, they both would have agreed to do it. But they could have gotten way more. And that's why it's bad. It did work out, but the fact that they didn't get more assets for freaking Shaquille O'Neal is crazy.
Yeah. Do you know what they turned any of those assets into?
I told you there was Jordan Farmar was the first round pick. And then
The Lakers traded Caron Butler and Chucky Atkins to the Wizards for Kwame Brown and Laren Profit.
right, but they did get
Everything else was crap, basically.
they did get Lamar Odom and Jordan Farmar, and those two guys were guys who were role players. Lamar Odom more, but they were both pieces of a championship team.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the only thing is that it seems a little bit that besides Lamar Odom, no one was really relevant. So in a way, they kind of just swapped Shaq for Lamar Odom. But even that's not the worst thing because they got him for 6 years. He got him for 2. I guess the Heat also got some return from Shaq in the future. Yeah.
But I mean, if you look back, you like, why didn't they get Dwayne Wade? Why didn't they get a star?
Yeah. It's so interesting because there's not really a great. I mean, it's funny. I guess the best comp to this trade is maybe the Luka trade. Luka was much younger, but in terms of just you don't shop the guy, you don't get maximum return, and then somehow it maybe ends up working out because the Mavericks somehow ended up with Cooper Flag because of this whole thing. But and whatever, now the Mavericks are scrapping the whole thing, tearing it down. We're really not going to know.
Right. I'll tell you who at the time, and I think the only trades you could really compare it to, the pre-modern era, like recently, would be Wilt, was traded by the Lakers, which maybe we'll have an episode on that. 1968. So we'll still dig deep into the archives. And Kareem leaving Milwaukee was the only other big men dominant players to leave their teams in their prime.
Was Kareem a trade or that was free agency?
I had to look into that. I think he was traded.
Yeah. So Kareem was acquired via trade.
And by the way, both these Lakers were involved. One the Lakers sent away, Kareem they got. So the Lakers have been involved in some historic big man trades.
Yeah. And Kareem also worked out really well for them.
Yeah. I the last thing I'll say, I said it before, but some of these GMs are so lucky they were pre-social media. They would get torched in today's day and age if they were doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they were still getting torched in the media. I also do wonder, it seems like the media, I'm not sure how tapped in / how much people care about the media at all. Like the players seem to care, but within ownership and front offices, they're so worried about the media. They're more worried about their fans. So if the media reflects their fans, but I don't know. It was after maybe the Warriors won the finals and they were just pissed at all these media members. And
I mean, but look at what's the GM of the Mavs name? Nico.
yeah,
Like
Nico Harrison.
the media and fans were killing him. They didn't give him 2 years to we'll figure it out and let's see if it turns into something. Fired. The Lakers didn't make the playoffs the next season. Mitch Kupchak wasn't fired.
Yeah, but
I think in today's day and age, there would be so much pressure from the media and fans that he'd be fired.
right. It is a little bit of a different situation with Luka because there was no Kobe there. There was no one else.
That's true. It's a
There's
good
no one
point.
pushing him out.
Right.
So it's not like Kyrie was like, we got to get rid of Luka.
Yeah.
They loved each other.
Absolutely.
But they had also just come off of a finals loss.
Yeah.
Maybe it was an extra season before, but
Yeah. To close out. Like we all knew Shaq was traded. And everyone thinks back on it and you think back of it in a positive light because the Lakers ended up winning. And Shaq won with the Heat. So it ends up like this win-win and good story. But when you really dig into it, it was interesting to really dig in and see like the actual pieces of it and like get the real nitty-gritty because it's pretty wild.
yeah, it's an awesome trade to break down because all you think about is, okay, like you were saying, Lakers traded Shaq. He won a championship with the Heat. The Lakers ended up winning championships. But I did not know any of the actual players that were involved in the trade, and I never processed that the Lakers could have done much better than they did.
If you ever asked anyone, like, name the top 10 worst trades, Shaq it would never be a part of that list.
Yeah, and it still wouldn't be. But
Right.
maybe it should be. Without the context, maybe it should be. Right. There's an alternate reality where things don't work out, or Shaq ends up winning 3 championships with the Heat, whatever it is, and then people remember this trade. Lamar Odom's trash, and I don't know.
Right. An alternate reality, or where he gets it, or they don't trade for Pau Gasol a couple years later, and the Lakers never go win.
Right. That's the best alternate reality. There's an alternate reality where they trade Shaq and then they're bad for the next 2 years. Kobe demands the trade, which he did. And instead of getting someone else, Pau Gasol, to keep Kobe, they end up trading Kobe, and that's just it.
Right.
They lost it. They ruined everything. Now they don't have Shaq and they don't have Kobe.
Yeah. Luckily, it worked out for all of our sakes. I think it's a great story in the end.
Thank you for listening to The Trade Rewind. You can find us on social media at The Trade Rewind on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. If you enjoy listening to the show, the best thing you can do for us is to leave us a 5-star on Spotify and share the episode.